Yeah. Said it was an easy game. Unfortunately, Christian Hawk disagreed and just absolutely ran him over. Blink and you'll miss it magic in that last game. Just an excellent, excellent victory there.
Yeah, that's just Gruul Adventures, right? It's a deck that is so capable of taking advantage of any sort of space that you give them. If you don't have your sequencing right, if you don't have the right answers at the right time, they're just able to fully steal the game and run away with it. And that's what we saw in both games 1 and 3. And unfortunately for Corey, the Selesnya Blink deck just wasn't able to get to drop them there.
All right, well, friends, that's going to do it for myself and Monty in the booth. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. When you come back, it's going to be Marshall and Eduardo taking you home. So we'll see you right after this.
Hello and welcome to The Bolt, your rapid-fire introduction to the most exciting players in Magic. And right now I am joined by Simon Görtzen. Simon, how are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So we'll jump straight into some questions. What is the best color of mana?
Blue, of course.
What's your favorite format?
Modern.
What's your favorite Magic deck ever?
Wow. Favorite Magic deck ever? Probably Dark Depth.
What's the worst deck you've ever played?
Oh, I've played a ton of really bad decks. I think the worst one was Proto Paris, where I played some weird equipment deck, but some quest equipment deck when other people were just playing Jaces and Stonefortress. It was not pretty.
What was the set you started playing with?
I opened my first booster of Stronghold, but for me the starting point is really Urza's Saga.
Who would be your biggest rival in the MPL or Rivals League? Who do you want to beat?
Oh, I want to beat everyone. I don't think I have a rival really. There are certain players I feel very good about beating simply because they are that good. Like Seth Manfield, whenever we queue on ladder, it's a really tough fight.
I'll ask you some non-Magic questions as well. So, yes or no, pineapple on pizza?
No.
City or countryside?
City.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Reading people's minds.
Oh, good one. Good for Magic too.
I don't know if it's all upside, but
yeah, fair. One last question for you. Where can we find you online?
That would be on Twitter. I'm Simon Görtzen, which is Simon and then Goertz.
All right, awesome. Thank you for talking to me.
From Mike, but mostly that it starts at 6.
Pacific?
Yes, Pacific.
Man, I just uploaded a video in literally 3 minutes that normally without my fiber would have taken 2 hours.
Yeah. Fiber's good.
Yes. I wish we could have fiber where we lived.
Yeah. It's built into my building and yeah, it's incredible. For people like Marie and I, particularly who are doing a lot of video uploads and stuff.
Life changing.
Like, yeah, 5 or 6 gigs and you're just like, oh, it's done. Like,
oh, done. Hey everybody, welcome back to coverage of MTG League Weekend, coming at you with the hot speed of fiber internet. I'm Maria Bartholdi, and we've got our last round of competition coming up here for today, round number 6. And this is a matchup I've actually been waiting for all day long. I'm so excited. I hope you're all hyped to see it as well. We've got Simon Görtzen versus Luis Scott-Vargas, two incredibly talented players here in round number 6, doing battle, and some interesting deck choices as well brought to the table this weekend, especially from Simon Görtzen. Both been playing Magic for a long time, and I just players who are at the top of their game almost every time you see them on camera. Today, we are watching the Rivals play. Tomorrow is going to be all MPL all the time, and this is our second league weekend. Each match win gets the player a point, and these points are going to be tabulated until the end of the season, where the players will get relegated into various gauntlet tournaments, which in the end decide whether they're going to be staying in the Rivals League, staying in the MPL, relegated down into the Rivals League, or dropping out entirely. So all this stuff that's happening this weekend, super important. I talked to Sigris a little bit earlier, Mike Sigris, and he said, yeah, the pressure is real. Every match matters, and all of your opponents are so good at this game. Take a look. Simon Görtzen's got 8 wins over 2 weekends so far. Luis Scott-Vargas, 12 wins. 4-color cycling for Simon Görtzen versus the popular Gruul adventure list for Luis Scott-Vargas. Let's take a peek at Simon Görtzen's deck list here. He used to do coverage with Simon. He's a great guy. Let's take a look at it. I mean, it's been a hot second since we've seen this deck, Eduardo, but here it is back again.
And I mean, if you like bloodbaths, this is a great match to watch. This is a horrible matchup for the 4-color cycling deck. Unfortunately, Gruul is kind of the nightmare matchup because they have cheap removal for your creatures before they can run out of control. Valiant Rescuer and Flourishing Fox are a big reason to run this deck, but when your opponent has Stomps and Fire Prophecies, not so great. And while Zenith Flare can take over a game in the long run, not very good when your opponent's beating down with a bunch of 5/5s for free mana and Ember Cleaves. So often you have to use them just to survive. So this is really a horrible matchup, I think, for Simon. But it's nice to see a deck like this. And the main idea behind running something like this is, look, people are going to try to beat Gruul. I'm going to beat the decks that try to beat Gruul.
Sure.
But this weekend there was a lot of Gruul. Biggest tech from the sideboard to keep an eye out if you wanted this to win. Red Cap Melee is okay, but not great. The key card, though, is Storm's Wrath. That can actually deal with the Gruul player's board while giving you a chance to kind of get those late-game Zenith Flares or play a Flourishing Fox with a bunch of cycling cards in one turn as they try to rebuild.
All right, well, let's take a look at the list that you think has a pretty good chance here. Luis Scott-Vargas bringing Gruul Adventures like lots of people this weekend. We've got the Akroan War as well in the main deck here, Eduardo.
Right. I mean, think about the Akroan War on something like Flourishing Fox if it ran out of control, or the Fire Prophecies, again, are key cards. Even Primal Might is just such a heavy tempo play, and post-board it doesn't get better. You have extra Fire Prophecies that can make sure that none of the creatures kind of go over the top. You don't really need to change much else. Honestly, as long as you have the spot removal in time, I think the Gruul Adventures deck should handily take over.
All right, well, we'll see if the power of the burrito will be with LSV in this matchup. Marshall Sutcliffe's going to take it away with the call.
Thank you, Maria, and welcome back, everybody. Woo, 12 wins for Luis Scott-Vargas, 8 wins for Simon Görtzen coming in. Luis had 9 coming from the last weekend. That means that today's going to be, this match is going to be the decider on whether he gets a 3-3 or can get that winning record coming out. Simon deciding to run back the cycling deck that he played in the first weekend. Luis, though, going with the times here and moving from the Rogues deck to this beatdown Gruul deck.
Right. But interestingly, as time has gone out, these Gruul decks have started resembling more mid-range decks than just straight-up beatdown decks. They've gone a little more top-heavy. They've been going more towards the Great Henge and Let's on Embercleave. And also, really importantly here, more on Fire Prophecy. So thankfully for Simon, you have 2 Flourishing Foxes. So that means that this Fire Prophecy that might have just locked out the game on one of the Foxes can't take out both. So that's actually going to be really important for Simon.
Yeah, Flourishing Fox, the best start for the deck. When it comes down early, it really does demand to be dealt with in this way. And if it isn't, think it's completely out of hand. Interesting scavenging news drawn off of the Fire Prophecy. He already had one in his hand, though.
Yeah. It was Scavenging News has quite a bit of utility in this matchup just because you can get rid of the graveyard, which can be good in a late game Xenoflare situation. And I don't think Luis wanted to essentially have an additional land in hand in terms of damage. Just wanted, but it didn't pan out that way with the Fire Prophecy, unfortunately.
Right. The second Scavenging News can give you redundancy in case one of them were to die, but they're not great in multiples on the battlefield. And he drew another Shatterskull Smash in anyway. So here comes Lovestruck Beast, but Luis knows that this isn't going to be able to hold back the Flourishing Fox for long.
Right. Now, while I did preview that this matchup was awful, there is a way to win, which is you're on the play and you have multiple Flourishing Foxes. Because it is true that once the Flourishing Fox is out of range, a red-green deck doesn't really deal very easily with Lustruck Beast. That's why that card is so good in the mirror match, let alone a 6/6, 7/7, whatever this is going to end up being. However, now Simon is in the rare position in a matchup like this of being ahead. The only issue is you can't go behind if your opponent plays a great henge, because then they can just snowball out of control, get more cards, and it can be difficult to take over. Plus, the life game is problematic. So I think here Simon is going to cycle. Well, I'm going to say that often, but cycle is to try to draw a land, because if a land got drawn, Simon would have been able to cast this Go for Blood and essentially take out the Lovestruck Beast. But without that, we're going to probably see the Great Henge come out next turn, along with Scavenging News, and Luis might be able to get out of this situation.
Yeah, the interesting card right now is the Footfall Crater in hand here for Simon, as that does give creatures trample and haste as well, but really trample being operative here, because one of the ways that Luis can win this game is by getting to the point where he can cast Great Henge by chump blocking a fair amount. Like we just saw this turn, he didn't attack with his 1/1 because he kind of had it earmarked for a chump block, and he got that chump block through. So now he's still at a relatively healthy 13 life. And if he can manage to go off with the Great Henge, as he's going to attempt to do here, Great Henge into Scavenging News into a card, he can continue to throw creatures in front as needed. But, of course, things get a little bit tricky when you have Footfall Crater around. As it stands, it's going to be in the yard here. But
I think the idea is you were going to probably keep the Go for Blood, or at least one of them, and you can draw into another Footfall Crater down the line, or a Zenith Flare. And either of those cards will get the job done.
Yeah, the Scavenging News throws a bit of a wrench in the works here, as it can, as you mentioned, deal with the graveyard over the course of time. But it is a bit of a slow process, and it looks like Easy Prey from Simon Görtzen is going to take care of that first Scavenging News. This is what we were talking about before with the redundancy. Well, having two Scavenging News on the battlefield isn't necessarily better. Having access to a second one is very nice here.
Right. And the reason, by the way, you saw Footfall Crater cycled as well is because of Lurrus of the Dream Den. So at any point, Simon can just put Lurrus in hand and then cast Footfall Crater. There's a lot of mana overall, but you can do it over 2 turns, and that can take over the game. But that was the card.
A Crow and War off the top. Interestingly, he may be able to use it to win the game, but primarily he needs to put something in front so that he doesn't get trampled over by that Flourishing Fox.
I mean, yeah, you get to attack with a 9/9 next turn. Yeah, let's go.
Pretty good. So now Görtzen has to wait a few turns to get his Flourishing Fox back, but he may be dead by the time that happens, especially given the way that Simon played this game. He's really kind of all in on this one Flourishing Fox that outclassed all of the creatures on Luis's side of the board for the most part.
Right, and this Rescuer is making 1/1s. They are relevant, to be fair, just because of the lack of trample creatures and no removal from Luis. But it's not long for this world because of the Akroan War.
Right. Luis is also gaining life every turn thanks to the Great Henge. Things are precarious at this point for Simon. That Akroan War was huge.
Let's see. We have about 10 or 11 cycling cards in the graveyard, if we count. So the thing is, every creature you exile with Scavenging News is essentially +2 life against a Zenith Flare.
Look at this. Look at this turn, by the way, from Luis, Eduardo. Sorry to interrupt you, but He could go double Brushfire Elemental Fabled Passage if he wanted.
Yeah. The thing is, the main thing is just making the largest creature for Embercleave because of Flourishing Fox Embercleave, right? That's what we want.
Right. And he does have exactly that lined up. As you see, that Fabled Passage there can get cracked. And then 3 attackers with the mana available with Embercleave is probably lethal.
I mean, we're looking at 20 trampling power. So, yeah, it is lethal. Now,
so it kind of has to be lethal, doesn't it?
I mean, you can put 2 1/1s in front of the. Well, you can put the free 1 in front of Elemental, a 1/1 in front of Ooze, and then you're left with 1 toughness, so it's exactly lethal. But remember, this is a game where Simon was on the play, had double Flourishing Fox, and still lost. This is how bad this matchup is.
Incredible. That Embercleave for Luis this turn. Insane. That is Simon's own Flourishing Fox having turned against him thanks to a Crone War. Luis really found the right stuff there, didn't he? That a Crone War off the top to steal the Fox, which meant that it couldn't kill him, and now it's going to kill Simon, plus the Embercleave here as well. Yeah, I may want to go for a red source here. There we go.
Yeah, green source would have been really hard.
Yeah, and there it is, the Insta Scoop from Simon Görtzen. And we're going to take a short break as the players consult their sideboards. We'll be back with more right after this. And welcome back, everybody, to coverage of the MTG League weekend. Luis Scott-Vargas versus Simon Görtzen in a rematch going back 10 years now. Pro Tour San Diego, these two faced off against each other in the finals of that Pro Tour. Ultimately, it was a German, Simon Görtzen, who ended up winning.
Yeah. I mean, that Pro Tour also involved Luis being undefeated until Simon decided to mercilessly take him out. So, nice little grudge match.
Luis actually has a lot of those floating around because he finishes second at the Pro Tour so much.
It's pretty good times.
It's true. We could tell this story about Andrew. We could tell it about Nassif. We've got Simon here. Yeah. There's a whole cast of them.
Yeah, I think he finished in the semis that Pro Tour specifically, but he finished semis in that specific Pro Tour. But
that's true. That is true. You're right.
Yeah. That said, by the way, from a sideboarding perspective, the Crone War was so instrumental in Game 1 that it might eagle-eyed viewers might have observed that they're in the sideboard for Game 2. And the main reason for that is because you get additional cheap removal like Fire Prophecy as well as Soul Seer. So you shouldn't be overrun by Flourishing Foxes like this.
Mm-hmm. I kind of like Luis's idea, though. Just steal it.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. It's a pretty atypical game, though.
Uh-oh, it looks like we had a little issue there with the stream, so we're going to have to address that. But we're getting it fixed right now. Yeah, that game really did illustrate the point that you made at the onset there, Eduardo, about how tough the matchup can be from Simon's perspective. Even with that excellent draw, Luis was able to quite cleanly go over the top, thanks to a couple of timely top decks there, and get the job done.
Yeah, I mean, to recap that game, right, Simon was on the play, had double Flourishing Fox, so went turn 1 Fox, turn 2 Fox cycle. So Luis did have the one removal spell in Fire Prophecy. It could have been Stomp. And then you'd think, okay, cycling deck, 2 Flourishing Foxes, gets to cycle all the time, might win. But it turns out, gave enough. There was that key turn, right, where Simon cycled, didn't draw the land to cast Go for Blood on Luststruck Beast. That let Luis play the Great Hench into Scavenging Ooze, which was just enough time, board presence, and card advantage to get to the Akroan War. And when you take a 9/9 Fox and put an Embercleave on it, that does spell the end of the game pretty quickly.
Yeah. Somehow also it's kind of funny when you see how these games play out. It was actually Simon with a white-red deck effectively that was able to make a much, much bigger creature than anything that Luis could muster, even though he's on Gruul, the color pair you would associate with big creatures.
Right. I mean, that's the power of Flourishing Fox. It can grow out of hand like pretty quickly. And I mean, it's the whole reason cycling is a deck, right? That and Xenoflare are essentially the 2 cards in the deck that often it's correct to mulligan extremely aggressively to try to have a turn 1 Fox, especially in a difficult matchup like this.
Yeah. Didn't end up working out there for Simon, even though he may have had the best of it. So the players are going to be hitting up their sideboards here as they have just done. And once we're ready to go, we'll be back into the match to bring you the rest of that. And it should just be a few seconds here before we can get back in. We do apologize for the inconvenience here, but we're getting it rolling and we're back in action here. So let's get back down. Take a look at the opening hands here.
I mean, there's Free of a Kind in Luis's hand.
Oh no, not the one you want to see though, is it? 27 mana worth of Great Henge in hand here for Luis Scott-Vargas.
Right, but at the same time, I wanted to highlight a point. A lot of people have been playing, in the early versions of Gruul, Scorching Dragonfire, but over time you realize, wait, what do I actually want to exile? There's no Planeswalker I want to damage. So Fire Prophecy ends up coming out as, wait, this is just a much better card because this is a mid-range deck. This is a deck that really needs to filter through its draws for relevant cards, and on top of that, you have a lot of legendary artifacts that are not very good in multiples. So Fire Prophecy can really smooth out those draws on top of being removal.
Yeah, this is one of those times when you get to see why it's better as long as you're not worried about those Planeswalkers. But as we've seen in this standard, I think it's kind of gone by silently, but Planeswalkers just not a super critical part of the metagame as they have been over the past few years. Once we saw War of the Spark leave, a huge swath of available Planeswalkers were no longer around. And, I kind of got used to it. Standard was really defined by Planeswalkers for that entire stretch. And I got to say, it's kind of nice to have a little breather here where we get a bunch of onboard stuff that isn't solely focused around that one card type.
Yeah, no, I can only agree. I am not a fan of Planeswalkers in general. So I will say, though, that the Planeswalkers that see play right now are different than what we're used to. The meme, of course, is the 5 mana +1, draw a card, -3, deal with the board, -8, win the game. Right now, the Planeswalkers that see play are very different. They're much more utility focused. Vivian Monster's Advocate, for example, is a really interesting Planeswalker. It's low loyalty, but can easily snowball a game in a different way we've seen it in a kind of combo deck in Temur Ramp earlier. In Gruul, it's kind of a mid-range option in the later stages of the game. The fact that you can make threats that aren't killed by Heartless Act and that attack on another axis has made that card much more relevant. So it's nice to see as well Planeswalkers while Vivian can defend itself, it doesn't take over a game in the same way as we've seen Planeswalkers in the past.
Interesting combo potentially coming up here, Eduardo. There is a Kazandu Mammoth on the battlefield. If there's a land for Luis Scott-Vargas, he may be able to try to leverage that to get the Great Henge down here. The combination of landfall creatures that get much bigger temporarily and Great Henge is really what's put it over the top and why you see so many copies of it being played now.
Right. This is also why Luis didn't play that Mammoth. It could have played it as a green source, right? But decided to kind of keep it in this scenario of, look, the only advantage my hand has is the Great Henge. If I don't deploy this, I'm in trouble. And this was the best setup. Hope to draw the land to get there. And yeah, got there.
There it is. There's a land off the top of the library. And that's going to line up this Great Henge just perfectly. Now, Luis will not be able to cast any spells off of it just now. He can gain the 2 life. But the Brushfire Elemental, of course, requires red mana, as does Fire Prophecy, so he'll only have access to green for the moment, and that does leave Simon Görtzen with some time to build out what is a pretty impressive board, but ultimately it's being held back by the Mammoth quite well.
Yeah. That said, as you mentioned, Simon's building up an impressive board, but it's essentially a board that can start doing something important, keeping toe-to-toe with the Great Henge. Because now Luis is kind of going to have to go after the Valiant Rescuer, and these Stingers are going to deal, a lot of incidental damage.
Yeah. Can it outpace the life gain from the Great Henge?
We're going to find out.
Yeah, even 2 Stingers, it's a lot of life you gain over time. Now, look at this. Luis is actually going for Adranus Stinger rather than the Valiant Rescuer. He prioritizes that. It looks like he doesn't see the Rescuer as a huge threat to his life total.
Right. And that speaks volumes, right? It's this idea that the Rescuer... So essentially, you're letting the Rescuer make 2 additional creatures, most likely, since Simon will be able to make one on his turn and then pass and make another one. But Luis's perspective here is that's just too much damage, most likely.
By the way, look at what he hit off of he discarded one of the Great Henges to Fire Prophecy, and boy, did he hit nice. He got Love Struck Beast that allows him to play the Heart's Desire and the Beast, get the cards, and now he even hit a Mountain. So things rolling along pretty nicely here for Luis. Probably digging around now, starting to set his sights on finding an Embercleave where these 1/1s just don't hold up.
Right. I mean, that was the power of Fire Prophecy. If that was Scorching Dragonfire, wouldn't have been that powerful. Whereas here, you get to continue doing, and we're going to start seeing one of the biggest issues with the cycling deck, which is it doesn't play a lot of lands, but at some point it does hit that glut, right? Because you're cycling a bunch of 1-mana cards, and they either replace themselves or you run out, right? At some point you draw lands or draw Zenith Flare, and really at this point, Simon is just hoping to be able to get those last points of damage, and is considering an attack here, which to me makes sense. This is the amount of damage you're going to be able to deal with your board it's going to get less and less likely as time goes on, because Luis has the Great Henge and can put a lot of bodies. So your 1/1s aren't going to keep up pace with what's in front. So if you attack here, you're looking at kind of banking in 4 damage, right? You get the Rescuer blocked by the 1/1, the 2/2 eat by the 6/6, and another 1/1. Might be 5 damage since you would want the Innkeeper to survive, but yeah. So decides not to attack though, because you get more turns by staying back is the logic as well.
But Luis, boy, he is going off now. He plays the Brushfire Elemental, and he finds himself another Fire Prophecy. Interestingly, did not discard that additional Great Henge here, and he's going to get rowdy. Simon Görtzen, perhaps on his last legs here. He does have Lurrus of the Dream Den to try to rebuild any creatures that were killed over the last few turns, but we haven't seen even a single copy of Flare from him in the whole match.
By the way, you were talking about that Great Henge. I'm wondering, Luis is very fast. I wonder how fast he counted the amount of cycling cards in Simon's graveyard, because it's just +2 life, but that might be correct. It might be correct to just go, look, +2 life, that's exactly what I need.
Interesting. Now here comes Scavenging Ooze to get him a card as well, and he can get another green source, so that'll leave him with 2 additional green sources. And he can start munching away at the cards in the yard. You can see he's going to start targeting the cards that Lurrus could bring back, potentially. Which is most of them, but there are some that it can't. So permanents or creatures are going to be the priority here. And Luis is looking in beautiful shape. He came into this round 3-2 on the day. He had 9 wins going back to the first weekend, so he's at 12 now. But there's you know how it is, Eduardo. There's a difference between when you come out of the day at an even record versus a winning record. It's a nice little bonus.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this earlier in the broadcast. Is the mental stamina you need. Every match matters. This is the league, right? Every match has absolutely equal weight. At the end, right, like the matches start looking a little different as the standings and what they mean start making more sense. But for now, we don't know, right? Every match matters equally, so you have to stay focused. Simon, at the start of this round, was actually 1-4 for the day. You still have this deck for 7 rounds. No matter what Simon does, you're going to have to play the best you can with this deck. In a normal tournament, 1-4, you're like, okay, look, I made a mistake, not the deck for the tournament. I'm out. I'm going to get some food, relax, try next time. No, you got 7 matches to play. Like, going free 9 is much better than going 1-11, for example.
Right. Huge difference, especially when we get to near the end of the season and you start to see these things where you look back weeks prior and said, was I off my game that one day? Could I have just picked up one random win on one random day? And yeah, it really does pay to focus. And I'm sure that Luis has like a vintage cube draft and a couple of games of Among Us going on the side, but otherwise he's really dialed in.
Yeah, otherwise. Interestingly, by the way, Brushfire Elemental is going to start looking quite strong with Simon and not a high life total. And these 1/1s cannot block Brushfire Elemental.
No, they can't.
They can block the Mammoth all day, the Luststruck Beast all day. That's fine. But Brushfire Elemental really needs the Valiant Rescuer to go in front, which is not ideal for Simon. I think Simon just really needs a Zenith Flare, but the impact of it is going to get reduced turn after turn from Scavenging Ooze munching away at that graveyard and essentially reversing the flare by 2 points each time, right? You gain a life from removing the creature, and the flare becomes worse because you removed a cycling creature.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, Simon is watching the power of his potential future draw steps just diminish as he falls down to just 1 life, hanging on by a thread. He does have 9 1/1s, but take a look. 22 life now for Scott-Vargas in a game that he was actually getting beaten down fairly well early, but the Great Henge and Scavenging Ooze have put him back above his starting life total, so he's got a great cushion there as well.
Right. And Scavenging Ooze being really important to make sure you don't just lose the flare. By the way, you saw Simon essentially block in a fashion of taking that extra damage. I think Simon recognizes, I need Zenith Flare this turn. So that's why you might have seen the block that way, is like those extra 1/1s could matter on the premise that, I need Zenith Flare.
Right. And it does make sense that, sooner rather than later on multiple axes here from Görtzen. And not only is he going to be facing down another lethal attack from everything from Luis Scott-Vargas, forcing Simon to trade off basically his board, but on top of it, those Zenith Flares are getting worse, as you pointed out before. And at this point, he cycled himself into a bunch of lands, and it doesn't feel like there's any way out for Simon Görtzen here. Luis is already up a game as well.
Yeah, and, this is over. You full steer the free one. You Brushfire Elemental deals the point of damage.
Yeah,
and that's it.
No blocks available here from Simon Görtzen. The Brushfire Elemental can get the job done all by its lonesome. Simon's going to scoop him up, and Luis Scott-Vargas is going to finish the day at 4-2. So another great start from him. He came in with an excellent record from last weekend of 9-3. That is basically the best record that anybody had outside of Ray Sato, who somehow crushed everybody, just kind of set his own mark there. But everybody else kind of grouped up at that 9-3 mark as being the top. And now Luis is roughly on par to do that again this weekend.
Right. The big thing was Ray was actually in the MPL and had a dominant weekend there. The Rivals League was a lot flatter. There weren't many people that were like going away by that much. So Luis combining that first good weekend with a 4-2 record today is consolidating that lead. And obviously really good shape. There's still a lot of weekends. We got tomorrow another day, and there's like 5 more weekends, so there's a lot of matches to go through.
Yeah, and the players, of course, know that. And it's funny because talking to Luis and some of the old school pros, I think they actually like this format because when you're really great at a game like Magic, you want a chance to show that. And any given tournament gives you a chance to have maybe a glimpse of your skill set, what the things that you're good at. But on any given tournament, anything can happen, and you're not really a favorite to do well ever. Right? Like there's no tournament in unless there's something very strange going on with the metagame or whatever, where you walk in as an individual player into a 400 or 500 player field and say, I'm likely to be in the top 8 players by the end of day 2. That's just not how it works. Even if you play really well and have a great deck, you're still not guaranteed by any stretch to make a top 8. Well, here it's a completely different thing. Now, instead of playing against other players who have your record, it's round robin, which means you play everybody in the league. So there's no questions. There's no, I got really lucky and I got to play against good matchups, bad matchups, players who aren't as invested as I am, etc. No, that's completely even. And there's a significant number of matches here, as you mentioned, Eduardo. This thing goes for weeks, and there's 7 of these weekends. That's actually getting up to a sample size that's going to show us who's doing really well, who was the most prepared, and who played the best over that stretch.
Plus, in a tournament you could face anybody. It doesn't mean that like people play. There are different qualities in different players, right? You could face people that are, as you say, maybe not so prepared. But in these fields, everybody is at least somewhat prepared, and certainly motivated, and has demonstrated good Magic skills at other competitions. You're not facing random people. You're facing some of the better players on the planet round after round after round. There's no breaks. There's not like there might be a relatively better matchup, or you might have an edge, or things might break your way. But with this many matches that are against this kind of top level competition, you have to be on the ball the whole way.
Yeah, and I think the players really want to prove that they're going to come out on top of that. With that, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll have more. Don't go anywhere.
Hello and welcome to The Bolt, the fastest way to get to know the most exciting players in Magic the Gathering. And today I'm joined by Rivals competitor Matt Sperling. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Not too bad, thanks. We'll get straight into some questions. What is the best color of mana?
I like red. Keep it aggressive. End the game, go on to the next one. I'm a red mage.
I like that. I have no patience. You can see by the format of this. What's your favorite Magic format?
My favorite Magic format is probably Team Limited. That's where you get to not only play limited Magic, which is always fun, as a break at least, but you get to do it with some of your best friends. Nothing better than that.
Do you have an all-time favorite card?
Yeah, my all-time favorite card is Preacher from The Dark. I really like the set The Dark. It's kind of like a horror theme, and I think that card's really cool.
Who is another player in the league that you want to face? Who do you think you've got a good game against?
There are a number of players in the league that I've played before and gotten, really good matches against. I think someone like Matt Nass is someone I like to play against because I know it's going to be a challenge that I feel like he always brings his A game and has been playing really well for the last few years. So that would be a matchup that I look forward to kind of challenge myself.
All right, some non-Magic questions. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yes.
Mario or Sonic?
Sonic.
City or countryside?
City.
And one more question. Where can we find you online?
You can check me out on Twitter @sickofit. You can check out my archive of articles on channelfireball.com. There's some humor ones, some strategy ones, and same thing on YouTube. It's Matt Sperling MTG on YouTube.
Hey everybody, me and my buddy Moxon here want to welcome you back to coverage of MTG League Weekend. We are in the last round of today here watching the Rivals. Tomorrow it's going to be all MPL all the time. So if you want to see that, make sure you tune in again tomorrow. But today, all Rivals, and we've got another feature match for you here coming up from the last round of the day, round number 6. It is Matt Sperling versus Miguel de Cruz Simoes. Matt Sperling rocking Esper Doom Foretold versus the deck of the weekend, really, Gruul Adventures in the hands of Miguel de Cruz Simoes. Let's take a look at Matt Sperling's deck list. Esper Doom Foretold, we saw it do work earlier in the hands of Emma Handy versus Gruul. Eduardo, what do you think about this version here?
So compared to, say, Sivka's version that we saw earlier in the day, this one's relying on kind of slightly more powerful cards. So rather than playing more Eliminates and Heartless Sacks, we see cards like Archon of Sun's Grace. I believe there are a few copies of Shatter the Sky. So it's really trying to leverage one-off powerful effects. And that's another difference are those Treacherous Blessings, because Treacherous Blessing is a really powerful card, but takes time to set up, and you're taking a turn off interacting with the board. So because you're not going 2-drop, free drop, double 2-drop as much, you really want to kind of catch up. So Treacherous Blessing into something like Shadow the Sky is really what this deck would love to do against Gruul. While there is life loss, every Yorion you do with Treacherous Blessing is so much card advantage that you get to deal with their board in a way that they can't recover. But make no mistake, if this deck's on the draw, it can be really problematic in this matchup.
Yeah, let's take a look at the Gruul Adventures list from Miguel here versus this Esper Doom Foretold list. Like you said, if it's on the draw for Esper Doom Foretold, it can be a problem because this deck is so good at just smashing face. 2 copies as well as Embereth Shieldbreaker in this list as well, Eduardo. Is that just one of the secret techs it's got in its back pocket that might help it out?
Well, in this matchup, not so much, but just to give context, right, we saw, you have a few slots. So some people have played Vivian Monsters Advocate, which we see here. That's kind of already preparing for those post-sideboard matchups that are a little more grindy. We saw Ox of Agonis that was amazing for Mike Sigrist against even Flock because it was against Rogues. Ember's Shieldbreaker is really to not lose to the Great Henge in the mirror match. While Embercleave can still be problematic, if your opponent goes the Great Henge, they usually have to take a turn off, and being able to answer that with Ember's Shieldbreaker for so cheap can help you in a tempo manner to catch up and make sure you're not behind. Plus, sometimes you just go Edgewall Innkeeper and you want that additional 2-drop, draw a card. It's a 2/1, but if it draws a card, it's perfectly fine.
All right, well, let's see what happens here in this matchup. I'm going to send it on down to Marshall Sutcliffe for the call.
Thank you, Maria. And here we go. You can see Miguel and Matt getting ready to face off against each other here. These two players, good number of wins between them as well. 12 wins and 11 wins, respectively, as they line up their opening hands here. So what is Miguel working with here on this Gruul deck? Looks like a pretty good opener. Ooh, and there's an Embercleave, too.
Yep, curve.
Right, 1, 2, 3, 4. That could be a very good one there for Miguel. Let's see if Matt Sperling can break up the party a little bit here, though, with his hand.
Matt's hand is actually pretty vulnerable to this. Without access to blue mana, you can't fire off the Omen of the Sea. Probably was kept on the strength of Treacherous Blessing plus Shadow the Sky, and maybe the hope of something like a Fabled Passage, since you could use the Cling to Dust to draw a card. But yeah, without that land, this is really problematic for Matt.
Let's see if... Oh, this is really bad then. Because here comes the team once again, and this curve out is just absolutely lovely here for Miguel. He is missing, it looks like a second red source for the Embercleave, but if he can find it, this may just be done. Ooh, there's an island, though, for Matt Sperling, who has Elspeth's Nightmare. That can take care of the Elemental and send it packing. And there's Fire Prophecy. No targets for that right now.
Yeah,
no second red source here either.
Yeah, Fire Prophecy is definitely going to be one of the weaker cards in the matchup. It doesn't deal with Archon of Sun's Grace, for example. It's not really the matchup for the card. It's more for mirrors.
Right.
As you mentioned, Embercleave would probably have been game over.
Put Sperling to 1, I think, right?
Right, but then you have to answer it with probably Shadow the Sky if you did top deck the mana, and then you would die to Questing Beast.
Right.
As it stands, you could just play Mammoth, or Questing Beast or Mammoth are really the choices here, I'd say. The advantage of playing Mammoth is you leave the haste creature in hand, so you can ensure that you're dealing more damage next turn. However, playing Questing Beast this turn is more mana efficient. I think I would still like the Mammoth, but I understand playing the Questing Beast since it's much better against any card that isn't Shadow the Sky. But in this spot, you just have to think, how can I lose?
Here's the second chapter now from Elspeth's Nightmare. This is Duress, which will take away the, before, at least up until this point, stranded Embercleave.
Oh, there were no lands coming for Matt.
Wow, and that is actually going to do it. He needed to hit a land, and instead, he hits nothing, and there's nothing to do. We're going to take a short break as the player goes to sideboard. We'll be back with more right after this. And welcome back, everybody. We upgraded to fiber over the break, and you can see the incredible quality we've got now. So, sideboarding just getting finished up here for Miguel. It looks like Sperling. Well, he already knew what he wanted to do.
Yeah, you probably going into this tournament, you probably already know what you're doing against Gruul in advance.
Is Gruul the best deck in Standard right now?
Yeah, no, unquestionably.
Unquestionably the best. Yeah.
You could. There are decks that do beat it straight up, so that'll be interesting to watch the MPL because they brought mono green food. Nobody brought Golgari Adventures, I think, because the Gruul decks were positioning to be more mid range. So while you could have maybe an edge in that matchup, chances are you wouldn't really necessarily have it, and then you might just be cold to the rest of the format. So there might be a version of Doom Foretold that is better because you could configure it to be Gruul and because you know what you're facing. However, that's a difficult call to make because you really, really have to be sure. And there's a lot of actually in testing, it can be really hard to make a judgment call if a deck is really favorable in a matchup or not, especially if it's just a minor edge, because you have a limited sample size. You're trying to make a version of the deck that is a little different, so you're hoping it's correct. You have to think about the variations your opponents have, and if your call is wrong, if they're playing cards you don't think of, or your matchup is off, then you're in real trouble when you start facing decks that are not what you expect it to.
Right. All right, well, let's get going here. Game number 2. That first game, not much of a game. A nice little curve out there from Miguel, even with some issues finding the second red source, did not slow him down particularly. And Matt Sperling, with major mana issues, just got ran over. One of the benefits to playing a deck like Gruul is that it's relatively consistent and its game plan is assertive. It punishes stumbles or bad mana or too many tap lands or all of those type of things much better. Where, if you flip the script on the other side and Miguel was the one who was, maybe missed a land drop or had some mana issues, you can fall behind, but Sperling's not going to have won the game outright before you actually get your mana under you.
Right.
That's, one of the benefits to playing a more aggressive deck.
Right. We've actually seen games where Gruul fell behind and then eventually got a great hand and came roaring back ahead. Yeah. Of course, Miguel would have loved to have a double green source this turn, since that would have been free 1/1s, and then you could follow up with Lovestruck Beast. And that's actually important because Lovestruck Beast is going to have, there's an answer to Lovestruck Beast, right? You're not making these 1/1s and going, okay, Lovestruck Beast is going to attack for 5 in this kind of post-board. Right. Yeah. So the extra 1/1 does add kind of multiplicative damage, unless you have a Shatter the Sky. Because they have to deal with your 5/5, which usually takes their turn, at least at the start. And then when they deal with your 5/5, that gives you that additional attack with your whole board. So that would have been 1 point this turn. It'd probably be 1 point next turn. It might have been an extra point later. And if there's a blocker, it might have been a final point. So we're talking 3 or 4 damage from just not having the second green source in time.
Wow, yeah, that adds up very quickly in these decks. And we see Doom Foretold hit the battlefield here for Sperling with one viable sacrifice target. On the other side, it's the 5/5 Lovestruck Beast that's going to hit the graveyard, leaving just the 2 Heart's Desire tokens left over. Really punishes these token situations.
Yeah, and this is one of the hardest spots with Doom Foretold from the opposing perspective is I know that if I play anything, it just dies to Doom Foretold because my opponent has an Omen of the Sea that can get rid of. But at the same time, the knight is potentially problematic already to start with. But then if your opponent just plays another permanent with Doom Foretold, you can't run out Vivian, for example, because it would just go. So
yeah.
And this is a horrible spot because you're not doing anything else. It's not like you go, okay, well, I'll play this Innkeeper, draw a card. That way I have 2 permanents. Okay, they dealt with both. That can happen. But at least I drew a card. In this spot, it's really difficult.
Looks like Miguel's strongly considering doing nothing. Boy, that Doom Foretold is really putting it to Miguel here. All right, he's Looks like he may go for the adventurous Love-Struck Beast, but he doesn't want to throw it away, so he's just going to pass the turn.
Interestingly, it doesn't even make the token,
No.
which I thought that was actually kind of intriguing. But I guess the logic is if there's a Wrath, I want to make sure that I can make a token. If I just have 2 Love-Struck Beasts in Adventure and no 1/1s, it's bad. I think the plan here is let the Doom Foretold kind of pop and then have Vivian and hope that that's good enough to take over. But Archon of Sun's Grace can be really problematic.
Yeah, this is really
nice.
tough.
This is nice, though. The card you discard is your reload option.
All right, so we see the Ox go into the graveyard here. So that did help out a little bit. Fabled Passage hits the board, and there's that second green source finally. And here comes Vivian, Monster's Advocate. Going to start making some Reach Beasts, it looks like. Going to need a few of them, though.
What's really nice about this is Archon of Sun's Grace only has 3 powers, so you can actually let the Archon go through on 1 attack. It is a bit of a risk, right? If your opponent plays any kind of, I mean, the option will be taken away, but if your opponent played any kind of enchantment, then it can be problematic to do that. But yeah, in this case, we're probably going to, yeah, trading makes sense. You can still make another 1/1 with Love-Struck Beast.
Vivian's going to fall down to just 1 loyalty off of that Archons of Sun's Grace attack. After the Glass Casket sent the 3/3 Reach Beast pack in. Wasn't likely to block anyway, but that did clear the way for the Knight to get in.
Now that we're going to see one of the biggest advantages of Vivian Monster's Advocate, it can act as a Great Henge Simul-Eye or Simulacra quite often, just because, look at this, you get to play Innkeeper and draw the card, plus the Love-Struck Beast came from the top of the deck.
Oh, interesting. And by the way, great use of Simulacra. Just running it out there, Eduardo. Well done.
I try. I try too much, which is clearly a problem.
Miguel prefers to keep Vivian on the battlefield here. Is going to go ahead and chump block. That Archon, it really matches up well against the 3/3 Reachers and then the 3 damage burn spells that this deck plays as well. The Archon's really a pain. And now it's going to start going off because look at this. Elspeth Conquers Death was the follow-up play. Sperling said, I had it all along. That's, of course, going to produce a 2/2 Pegasus as well with flying.
I mean, Miguel knows that was top deck since it would definitely have been played last turn.
Right.
But this is really bad news for Miguel because you know about that Yorion in hand. So you know this Elspeth Conquers Death is going to get rid of another permanent. On top of that, how are you racing against these lifelinking flyers? Yeah, you can see the face. The face says it all, really.
It really does. Okay, well, here's the Great Henge. And that can lead right into the Love-Struck Beast, which is going to get not 1 but 2 cards into hands for Miguel and a land before passing the turn back. So, you know, Miguel is giving Matt many things to deal with here, right? At 18 life, Matt is safe on that perspective for the most part. But the Great Henge, last time it was the Planeswalker. These things are must deal with. Here comes a Skyclave Apparition.
Yeah, but this is what happens when you give the Yorion deck that 1 or 2 additional permanents. It snowballs out of control. Apparition is going to get... Yeah, Apparition's going to get rid of Love-Struck Beast. The Elspeth Conquers Death will probably get rid of the Great Henge, and the Glass Casket will also have a Love-Struck Beast. Also, you probably made it's at least a Griffin token, so you're also presenting a 2-turn clock in the process of getting rid of your opponent's board.
Miguel's like, powerful 5-mana Planeswalker. Sperling's like, nah. How about 9-mana artifact that draws me a bunch of cards? Sperling's like, nah. Not particularly worried. How about a 1/1? I'll let you keep a 1/1.
You can have that.
That reluctantly had to agree to those terms as Matt has left his board completely eradicated outside of the little 1/1 spirit token there.
Right.
Or illusion token.
Plus, you have the Elspeth Conquers Death Tax, which means that you couldn't even have had an out of Shatterskull smashing.
There was the old Elspeth Conquers death tax.
Yeah,
Is it
and the
still
current one
applying?
too.
Yeah, good God. All right. Well, that is Miguel scooping him up because Matt Sperling just put it to him. We're going to take another short break as the player sideboard. We'll be back with more right after this. And welcome back. So here we are, just checking out the sideboarding here for Miguel. Yeah, go into that tank, Miguel, because whatever you came up with last time certainly wasn't enough. Matt Sperling, over the top, really. I mean, because when you think about it, Miguel got to do all the things, right? Planeswalker hit, Great Henge hit. There was an Edgewall Innkeeper drawing multiple cards per turn. None of it mattered after Sperling got set up with that Yorion.
Yeah, but a lot of that setup was due to Doom Foretold and not being able to produce a 1 or 2 drop that was not a token. I think if there was a Edgewall Innkeeper or a honestly even something like a Shieldbreaker or a Brushfire Elemental, that game might have panned out differently because then you keep the Lustruck piece and get to attack and you get to deploy more frets. So I think that was actually a really important part of that match.
Yeah, it did feel like the momentum, even that early in the game, just deflated there for Miguel once Sperling was able to play Doom Foretold and pass the turn back.
Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, because this might get negated.
Negate here? Yeah. This is I mean, it's a 1-for-1 on a card perspective, but it feels like a 2-for-1 when you get to negate a stomp, doesn't it?
Yeah, now there's no threat. So by the way, I do applaud that Miguel took the time to think about that one. I think most people would not have taken the second. And Miguel actually did consider it, and I think correctly went, okay, whatever. If there's negate, there's negate. It just didn't pan out, but I at least considered it. I thought that was just the consideration was heads up.
You're giving him props for thinking. I like it. There's Treacherous Blessing now from Sperling, who I think had a discard to hand size there. And now there's a Bone Crusher Giant, way too little too late, but critically, no land here for Miguel.
Oh yeah, you could see Matt nodding the head. That was because Baneslayer Angel got top decked. You got Doom Foretold. You got a Treacherous Blessing that's more than happy to go to the graveyard while you get rid of your opponent's only threat.
This has got to be GG, right? If you're sitting in Sperling seat, you're just thinking this is over. Worked out beautifully for him too, getting rid of the draw 3 Treacherous Blessing, so he doesn't have to deal with the extra life from that. And look at this. He's going old school. Baneslayer Angel on the battlefield, baby. Welcome back.
Somebody called it Boomer Slayer Angel, which I loved.
Oh, that is great. It's so not though, right? Like, because it actually only came out in M10.
Right, that's
which was only 10 or 11 years ago. We can go back way further than that.
Yeah, I know. There's this picture in your background that I can see of Manowar. But yeah, Question 3 is not looking so great against Baneslayer Angel. One keyword soup to the other. It turns out that first strike is the most important part of all of that.
Indeed. Wow. This has been an absolute slashing here by Matt Sperling in game number 3. He gave up game number 1, game number 2. Again, he took all of Miguel's hardest punches and punched back even harder. But this game has been the worst of all for Miguel, as Sperling has just had these beautiful sequences line up.
Yeah, I just don't see a way back for Miguel. So while we see this game narrowing down, it's still a good day, right? You still finish at 13 wins and 11. There are 2 types of people, Marshall. There are Magic players that say that Baneslayer Angel was only 10 years ago, and others that say, wow, it was all this time 10 years ago? That's so much.
It's true. Oh, it's funny. I because when I think of old school cards, I think of like what is it called? Psychotog?
Sure.
You know,
Yeah, that's
stuff
fair.
like
That's an old school. Not
how about Urnum Jin?
Urnum Jin? Yeah, there we go. Well, we got in the MPL Juzum Jin.
Yeah, there you go. I saw a little while ago we had Hall of Famer Mike Turian in the chat. He's played some Urnum Jins in his day.
By the way, Kazandu Mammoth also reminds me of an old school card, right? It's like Trained Armadon, but we're also going to add a relevant keyword ability. Oh, and it can also be a land, just in case.
Yeah, it is kind of a snapshot of what cards used to look like versus what they're like now. BDM says Shivan Dragon.
Well, I mean, that's almost like a legendary card rather than... I mean, the game... Oh, I love this, by the way. You remove the reach counter.
And even Miguel has to give a little smile there. That's how far ahead Matt Sperling is right now. Really no way out for Miguel. This attack alone would be for 7 minimum, as Miguel falls down to 2. At this point, Matt's just ignoring Vivian because he knows that his board is so big that there's no way for the red-green deck to remove all of those creatures, and he can just attack with everything. And there's the big win for Matt